Hey again, welcome back to Daily Dose of Anime Recaps. In this video, we'll be covering episodes 1 to 10 of the series The Eccentric Family. The series here is basically set in a world ruled by three races, humans, tanuki, and tengu, simultaneously. The city-lover humans live in their skyscrapers while the shape-shifting tanuki dwell deep within the forest. Last but not least, tengu happen to be rulers of all that's up above with their ability to soar high into the sky. In the initial scene, we witness Shimogamo Yasaburou, who's the protagonist of this series, as well as a tanuki raccoon running amok among the streets of Kyoto. The careless dude seems to be enjoying himself to no end while having shapeshifted into a cute-looking teenage girl. Meanwhile, his little brother Yashiro wonders whether Yasaburou's shameless act will incur the wrath of their elder brother Yoichiro. Apparently, Yoichiro is somebody with a nagging sense of responsibility and loves placing their race's long-standing traditions on a high pedestal. For all Yasaburou cares, tanuki traditions can go eat dirt. Sadly enough, the boy ends up running into Yoichiro while out for a stroll. Witnessing his younger brother posing as a teenage cutie, Yoichiro's ears start fuming with red smoke. The guy then gives an earful to Yasaburou about being a regrettable son who has disgraced the blood of Soichiro, their great father. Anyhow, Yasaburou pays no heed to his elder brother's non-stop blabbering and slips away soon afterwards. Finally, he arrives at his master, Professor Akadama's place, who happens to be an old tengu with one foot already in the grave. Poor Akadama is unable to fly anymore thanks to a back injury he suffered years ago. The grumpy old fella starts spouting insults at Yasaburou as soon as he steps inside the house. However, despite their surface quarrels, the two seem to get along fairly well together, it seems. Turns out the unlucky dude got stuck with babysitting the old fart thanks to none of Akadama's other students feeling up to the task. While chatting with his master, Yasaburou's train of thought heads back to the past after Akadama mentions Benten, his most beloved student as well as a human magician. The guy then starts reminiscing about his first ever meeting with Benten, the girl who's akin to a fairy from beyond the heavens. That day, Yasaburou had fallen head over heels for Benten after witnessing her graceful flight and manners. Back in the present, Akadama starts feeling nostalgic towards his beloved student who hasn't visited in quite a while. As a result, he charges Yasaburou with delivering a letter to Benten. Not willing to face her head-on, Yasaburou resorts to shooting an arrow to deliver the letter instead. Unfortunately, said arrow pierces Benten's precious folding fan, making her flash a rather dangerous smile on her lips. Benten soon traces Yasaburou back to his hidey hole at the nearby pub. The scary and unpredictable lady then teasingly threatens to make a tanuki hot pot out of Yasaburou, since he dared ruin her precious folding fan. Later on, she indeed pays her master a visit, albeit a short one as she leaves soon after saying hello. As a result, Yasaburou ends up transforming into Benten to soothe his master's worries and put him to sleep. Next morning, the guy checks up on Yajiro, his second eldest brother, who became traumatized thanks to some tragic experiment in the past. Then, after transforming into a frog, he simply lost the ability to change back. Being stuck in his frog form, Yajiro's entire day goes by listening to a heckload of strangers as they throw their worries along with a ton of coins at him. Astonishingly, Yasaburou's frog-in-the-well brother became quite a hit ever since his debut years ago. After all, there's quite a few perks at having a stranger listen to sorrows and share valuable feedback. What's more, the fact that he's in the well 24/7, forced to listen to their nagging tales whether voluntarily or otherwise, makes things quite convenient for all others. Anyhow, thunder strikes while the brothers are busy chatting with each other. Turns out their mother's terrified of thunder and fails to hold their human form whenever it occurs. Same goes for Yashiro, whose worry forces him to abandon his work at the factory and flee. Unfortunately, poor kid is intercepted by Kenkaku and Genkaku, the shithead brothers whose factory Yashiro works at as a trainee. Despite being cousins, neither of the two brothers are willing to cut Yashiro any slack. Luckily, Yasaburou intervenes just when the two are about to punish his innocent little brother. What's more, the eldest Yoichiro comes rushing as well, while having transformed into a tiger. The fearless dude manages to throw the dim-witted brothers into the river after biting down hard on both their butts. Later, the three separate in search of their mom until they finally discover her under the bridge. Turns out she had been at risk of slipping into the river as well, but got saved thanks to Keisai Kinkaku and Genkaku's younger sister, as well as Yasaburou's ex-fiancée. This one's quite the introvert and mysterious type and keeps avoiding to make an official appearance until quite late into the series. Sometime later, Yasaburou is seen recalling his deceased father Soichiro, who had single-handedly united Kyoto's entire tanuki society on his own when alive. That said, Soichiro used to be the Tanuki Naisaemon as well, a title reserved for their race's chief. Unfortunately, Yasaburou's charismatic father had a tragic ending after being captured by Friday Fellows, a nasty club comprised of 7 humans. These wretched humans make it a point to stew and then feast upon Tanuki flesh each time at their year-end bash. Poor Soichiro got unlucky that year and was captured and eaten alive after being made into a Tanuki hot pot. All 4 brothers, as well as their mom, had been dumbfounded at first and later became beyond devastated after learning of the tragedy that befell their beloved father. Days later, Yasaburou's mother reveals how the fire festival is coming up ahead. Apparently, it's been a Tanuki tradition to launch airborne leisure cruises and throw parties in the sky. This year is the same, except that Yoichiro fails to line up a leisure cruise thanks to some sort of mishap. The guy then turns to his younger brother Yasaburou for help, who agrees to lend a helping hand on the condition that Yoichiro beg him for his help. Later on, he pays a visit to Yajiro at the well, and the two chat about Yasaburou's ex-fiancée Casey. Casey's father, namely Sound Ebisugawa, happened to be Soichiro's blood brother and was therefore Yasaburou's uncle. Back when he was still alive and kicking, Soichiro had decided to betroth his son Yasaburou to Casey, despite being on bad terms with his brother Sound. Unfortunately, the wretched uncle nullified the engagement soon after Soichiro filled the Friday Fellows' tummies as a hot pot. Yasaburou finally pays a visit to Master Akadama and requests to borrow his inner parlor, a special edition leisure cruise that's truly akin to some sort of parlor. Said inner parlor is able to take flight upon having its teapot fed with brandy. Sadly enough, Akadama had already gifted the inner parlor to Benten. As a result, Yasaburou ends up requesting Benten's favor. The eccentric girl agrees, but on the condition to have Yasaburou entertain the Friday Fellows and even possibly make a hot pot out of him, should he put a single scratch on her inner parlor. Afterwards, Professor Akadama agrees to join Yasaburou's family for the fun after deliberately acting like some big shot for a while. Had it been possible, the old fart would wish for nothing better than the entire Tanuki family licking his feet before he boards the inner parlor. While feasting, Akadama and another of his friends recall events from the past. Back then, the professor was at odds with the Kuramas, a renowned Tengu clan. As enemies, those maniacs used to throw regular Give Akadama hell parties atop a mountain. To end his friend's suffering, Soichiro pulled off a massive feat by transforming himself into a massive mountain. As expected, once the Kurama henchmen settled on top of the fake mountain, Soichiro spared no effort in giving them whatever beatings they deserved. As a result, the mighty Kurama Tengu literally pissed their pants and scurried away in fear. Back in the present, Ebisugawa's massive cruise liner makes an abrupt entry. Apparently, the irritating bunch intends to pick a fight with Yasaburou's party. Though what really irritates the others is seeing Benten celebrating the festival along with Ebisugawa's, rather than joining her master at her own inner parlor. Anyhow, the inevitable fight does happen, as the Ebisugawas would rather die than waste an opportunity to provoke Soichiro's kin. Yoichiro's definitely against doing anything that may reflect badly on his reputation later. After all, he's to take part in the Naisaemon elections not long after he proved his worth as Soichiro's eldest son. They each start shooting firework cannons as well as a ton of other things at the Ebisugawa's cruise liner. Despite all the efforts though, the Shimogamos are still on the losing side as Ebisugawas bind their inner parlor in place using a hook. However, just as the enemy is about to launch one final barrage of fireworks to rip apart the inner parlor, Yasaburou's attention is caught by the carefree Benten. She points to his left, and as the guy Woon becomes ecstatic after taking a look at the direction she's pointing at, turns out Benten had been anticipating the fight and therefore left her Fujin Rajan folding fan at the inner parlor for Yasaburou to use. The fan is all repaired now, and with just a single swing of it, Yasaburou is able to generate mighty winds that wreak havoc on the Ebisugawa's cruise liner fast downwards, forcing them to crash downwards. Sadly enough, all brandy bottles are ruined in the earlier skirmish, and as a result, the inner parlor crashes thanks to not receiving a single liquor drop. What's beyond hilarious is that the stubborn Akadama would rather crash down into the forest, plus watch his disciples' inner parlor ruined instead of sparing his bottle of brandy as fuel for the blasted tea kettle. Out of misfortune, Benten's beyond precious fan is lost as well thanks to the crash. Taking into account the ruined inner parlor, Yasaburou is certain that his life is hanging by a perilous thread. Benten may make an appearance at any moment and make the most exquisite and scrumptious tanuki hot pot out of him. Without hesitating, the clever dude tucks his tail between his legs and runs for dear life. As a result, the guy becomes renowned in Kyoto as Yasaburou the fugitive not long after. Months later, Yasaburou somehow sneaks back into Kyoto for a short visit. Unfortunately though, Benten makes a surprise visit at the restaurant where he's currently holed up, all thanks to a tip from the detestable Ebisugawa brothers. Yasaburou panics and hurriedly transforms into a dorama. Despite the effort, the highly perceptive Benten still recognizes him, since it's kind of odd for there to be two doramas placed on top of the same table. Furthermore, the two are exact replicas and share similar burn marks as well. That said, Benten lights up a cigarette and blows the smoke on the two doramas. Poor Yasaburou sneezes and is finally forced to surface in such a way. Soon, he's held captive by his psychopathic crush as she embraces him in her arm. Then, to uphold her threat from months ago, Benten finally takes Yasaburou to the Friday Fellows for entertainment purposes. Once there, Yasaburou's carefree personality allows him to quickly morph into his role as the evening's entertainer. The guy is even found competing against Hotai, a Friday Fellows member, in a chewing competition not long after. Later, he pulls off a glorious round of shape-shifting tricks to entertain the audience. The dudes are particularly refreshed after the shameless Yasaburou transforms into Benten herself and starts posing in a highly seductive manner. Later on, Hotai recalls how he once saved an injured tanuki, had her recuperate at his place, and fed her a ton of delicious stuff as well. Said tanuki used to whimper and bury herself in a blanket every time thunder struck, quite similar to how Yasaburou's own mother reacts whenever a thunderstorm makes an unannounced visit. Anyhow, the tanuki female was cursed soon after and left for good. Right then, the others question why Hotai is the most cheerful when munching on tanuki hot pot at every year-end bash then. To address everybody else's doubts, the weirdo claims to be in love with tanuki to a point where he just can't help but gobble them up. Once the party's over, Benten has a private date together with Yasaburou under the splendid moonlight. She shares how she's also taken a liking to him and thus wishes to eat him. However, doing so would result in him being gone forever, something that may lead to depression and sorrow for her. Hotai joins them soon afterwards, and together they go for a jump stroll across the city buildings. The professor soon starts recalling the day he had first met Benten. It was the day she first joined Friday Fellows. Back then, she had been asleep next to Soichiro, Yasaburou's father, who had been caged and was supposed to be eaten at that night's year-end bash. Benten later woke up and said her apologies to Soichiro for being the one to cook him alive. At the same time, she claimed to be happy for availing the opportunity to gobble him up. Her contradictory words made Hotai fall for her on the spot. Not unusual considering the weirdo's unusual taste towards tanuki himself. Back in present, Benten pulls off what the Friday Fellows refer to as her early exit, and thus leaves the other two stranded on top of the skyscraper. Left alone, the two start conversing, and Yasaburou complains to Hotai about his race being in constant danger of humans turning them into a hot pot. He claims how humanity can be so easygoing solely because they pack any natural predators who threaten to cook them alive. Hotai finds Yasaburou's words agreeable. The professor then claims to feel lonesome about dying as a wrinkly old man on some wretched hospital bed, resulting in him being of use to nobody. He would much rather prefer the same fate as tanuki and be boiled into a hot pot. That way, he may end up nourishing another sentient being, adding some meaning to his existence. Hotai then recalls how the tanuki from when Benten first joined was one with dignity and tons of resolve. The little guy didn't bat an eye despite being captured and knowing his fate as mushy food on the Friday Fellows' bellies. Rather than weeping and begging for his dear life, the guy claimed to have done what he sought to do by having raised 4 magnificent kids. Any more days after that were a bonus as far as he was concerned. Hotai had been flabbergasted after learning how the only thing that worried Soichiro was that he may taste bad and end up ruining the Friday Fellows' year-end bash. Their conversation was cut short after Benten woke up and all. Later that night, Yasaburou pays a visit to Yajiro at his well and crashes in it for the night. The depressed dude claims to have a love-hate relationship with Hotai. However, even so, he can't help but detest the man who are his father a little. In the end though, both Yasaburou and his elder brother Yajiro admire Hotai's ideology and declare him as an okay personality. Just then, Benten pays Yajiro's well a visit as well. The erratic girl says or does nothing except for shedding a heckload of tears, enough in quantity to turn the well water salty, much to Yajiro's horror. A few days later, the youngest brother Yashiro comes begging for Yasaburou's help. As it happens, Professor Akadama is being a stubborn old fart again, refusing to dip into the bath and smelling like absolute crap these days. Upon visiting, Akadama finally concedes after a friendly chat with his disciple. During the standoff, the professor threatens to blow away Yasaburou with his tengu winds, while Yasaburou himself transforms into a bull and starts mooing crazily. Thankfully, the grumpy professor agrees to slip into a hot bath with furballs such as Yasaburou and his brothers after a little convincing. The Ebisugawa brothers arrive just then along with the family's elite guard and threaten Yoichiro into forfeiting the Nizamon elections. As expected, Yoichiro refuses to do so almost instantaneously and then aggressively transforms into a ferocious tiger. The brothers aren't too worried about having their asses bit yet another time. Turns out the idiots prepared in advance this time around and are wearing iron underwear as bite-proof protection against Yoichiro's ruthless jaws. Even so, still, both Genkaku and Genkaku fail to avoid their fate of being thrown into the hot bath. Genkaku is then blackmailed into revealing his family's trump card for dealing with Yoichiro in the Nizamon elections. Not telling would result in him being drowned into the freezing cold bath next to the one he's currently in. Turns out, the trump card happens to be a matter of shame for the Shimogamo family, and may indeed prove to be a hurdle in Yoichiro winning the upcoming Nizamon elections. According to Genkaku's research, the Shimogamo family's second eldest brother Yajiro was the last living soup to have come into contact with his father Soichiro before the latter got cooked alive. Yup, it's the same Yajiro who loves being a frog at the bottom of the well these days. Apparently, both of them had a drinking round recently, but when Yajiro somehow abandoned his dead drunk father and left all by himself. This eventually led to the capture of Nizamon Soichiro, the great tanuki who happened to be one of the peak figures among the Kyoto society back then. Once they're done hearing Genkaku's report, both Yasaburou and Yoichiro rush back to Yajiro's well. At the well, Yajiro admits to have indeed led to his father's doom by abandoning him that fateful night. What's more, this tremendous guilt is in fact the reason why he's holed up in such a wretched well in the first place. Years back, Yajiro had been hailed as the tanuki with the least motivation and drive. In those days, the only time he ever showed even a sliver of motivation was when it came to drinking alcohol. On the night of Soichiro's capture, Yajiro had a private consultation with him. Turns out poor Yajiro had been stuck in an impossible love situation, since the one at the receiving end of his love was none other than Casey, his younger brother's fiancée. Back then, Yajiro had been of the mind to split from the family to avoid causing trouble. However, his father instructed him against doing so. According to him, all 4 of his sons inherited his blood. Anyhow, with the counseling session over, Yajiro shapeshifted into an electric train upon his father's request, and the two started running amok among the streets of Kyoto. Eventually, though, the alcohol got the better of him, and Yajiro failed to look after his father. Later, upon hearing of his father's downfall, Yajiro lost all motivation to live on and became a frog in a well. Ever since then, Yajiro has been shouldering the blame of having indirectly killed his own father. With that line of thought, he couldn't possibly continue living with his family anymore, acting as if all is well and nothing ever happened. Back in present, the brothers depart from the well in a dejected manner. Yasaburou later heads back to the hot bath to fetch Master Akadama. The professor then claims to have himself been the last to see Soichiro instead of his son Yajiro. As unbelievable as it may sound, Soichiro's ghost had come to pay Akadama a visit after his death. The two old friends then had a round of drinks, and afterwards, Soichiro requested for Akadama to look after his son Yasaburou, the one who's most like him. Soichiro then departed for the afterlife just like that. Back at home, Yasaburou's about to reveal Yajiro's backstory to their mother, but interestingly, she already knows. Having known what happened all along, their mother never blamed Yajiro for her husband's death, even for once. Now, she hopes for all the others to do the same and forgive their brother, which the others willingly do. In fact, instead of pointing fingers at their beloved brother, Yoichiro and the others just feel sorry for him, knowing how guilty he feels and all the hardships he must have faced until now. Days later, Yasaburou's mother reveals an interesting account of how her husband Soichiro would lose his transformation whenever Benten was nearby. Apparently, the great Naizimon became anxious whenever he was in Benten's presence, and would transform back into a helpless raccoon as a result. This had in fact been the reason why Soichiro mostly avoided heading over to Akudama's place during his last years. In present times, the Shimogamo family arrives at a gathering where both Saon and Yoichiro are announced as competitors for the title of the next Naizimon. From the looks of it, a tengu is needed to preside over the election matters according to some long-lasting tanuki tradition. Knowing the perfect man for the job, Yasaburou's mother comes looking for him while the former is busy warming his butt. She then requests for him to pay the old tengu for a visit, and somehow sweet-talk him into attending the elections of the tengu representative. As expected, a little flattery on Yasaburou's part is all that's needed in order to have Akudama make an entrance at the Naizimon elections. Later on, while he's busy taking a bath, Casey found the woman's bath next door, calls out to him on his stupid song, and the two start chatting as a result. Kaiser seems certain of her father's victory thanks to her brothers having crafted some wretched scheme again. Seeing that Yasaburou appears confident in the ability to fend off any attacks, Casey claims how the conspiracy this time around may be far deadlier than before and suggests for Yasaburou to keep his guard up 24/7. After Casey freaks out for a moment after an accidental mention of Benten on Yasaburou's part. From the look of it, Casey seems to hate Benten's guts down to the letter T, due to whatever unknown reasons she may have. Finally, Casey leaves after apologizing to Yasaburou in a mysterious and totally unexpected way. The smart dude is certain how the humble apology wasn't just for show, and so he starts feeling an ominous sense of upcoming doom. Early in the morning, Yasaburou has a chat with his elder brother Yoichiro and informs him of Casey's mysterious apology as well as the Ebisugawa's wicked schemes still hidden in smoke. Far away, Ginkaku and Kinkaku have already set their plan in motion and lock Yashiro inside the factory after fooling his cell phone out of his hands. What's even more astonishing is how the Fujin Raijin folding fan lost by Yasaburou on the Fire Festival's night is currently in the Ebisugawa's custody. Said fan is used to summon a thunderstorm as part of the plan. Next, Yasaburou's mother is captured after panicking and failing to regain her transformation thanks to the fearsome thunder. Soon afterwards, Yoichiro is tricked and caught as well while rushing to rescue his mother. On the flip side, Casey warns Yasaburou of his family members' capture and how her old man intends to dispose of the entire Shimogamo family. What's more, he intends to start by landing Yoichiro in a hot pot, just like what he did to their father Soichiro. Yep, all along it has been Sound, the one who led to his own blood brother's death thanks to mere jealousy. Years ago, both brothers had become smitten by the same woman, but Soichiro won out in wooing and marrying her first. Later, he bested Sound in the elections and became the Naizimon of Kyoto's Tanuki society. The two consecutive defeats left Sound feeling jealous and resentful. Then, one day the opportunity for vengeance finally presented itself after he discovered the dead drunk Soichiro goofing around with his son Yajiro. The two brothers got together for some dinner upon Yajiro's departure. Just then, Benten appeared out of the blue, forcing Soichiro to lose his transformation and fall back to being a helpless little raccoon. As expected, Sound had invited her for that very purpose. As for Benten, the ungrateful witch went behind her bastard's back and sold out his dearest friend just so she could end up joining the wretched Friday Fellows Club. What's funny is how Casey witnessed the entire gruesome incident thanks to her having transformed into a keychain which her father carried along that night. Just as she finishes her story, Sound arrives along with plenty of his goons from the Ebisugawa family. All those men corner Yasaburou in an instant instant, threatening to resort to violence unless he surrenders ASAP. This wraps up the episode's end, and we are left pondering several mysteries. Will the Shimogamo family truly be wiped out of existence by the cruel sound, the guy who had his own brother boiled in a hot pot? We shall discover the answers in the next couple of episodes of The Eccentric Family. And in case you're a subscriber with notifications enabled, you'll learn the answers as well.